right. Hello, everybody. We are live
All right. And welcome
to Life
Style.
Business. I don't know why we keep
We
doing
never
that.
like that as the intro.
Welcome to Lifestyle Business on Launchpad TV.
Yeah.
I'm Chris Schultz.
And I'm Ann Driscoll. And we are excited to welcome Preeti Chemiti, Eric Lynn, and Emma Watts, the brain trust behind the mental health guidebook, Mind Matters, written by students.
For students. The toss back and forth thing.
It never works. Mind Matters supplements critical mental health research with over 150 student interviews, responses to better engage their readers, and help their peers better navigate mental health concerns during COVID.
So we'll be welcoming them in a few minutes. In a few minutes. But how's your mental health?
Good question. I don't know. I'm here dressed as Mamala, and my mental health is doing fine. Hopefully my sparring partner today won't interrupt me or go over his time consistently. I'm talking, Chris. I'm talking. Please let me talk. Anyway.
There's something on my head.
I think we all tuned into the debate last night. I know plenty of folks who were anticipating the fireworks to come. They, of course, forgot that the great fizzler of fireworks is Mike Pence, which is his job to just defuse any potential sparks of excitement or enjoyment or anything. But it was interesting. I had some interesting text messages from both sides of the aisle during the debate. Did you have any comments?
I'm interested in your comment. I'm gonna, not interrupt your time.
Let my 2 minutes go through. No,
if I learned anything,
that is true. No, I thought it was interesting. I didn't think it was very game changing. I do think people were anticipating something to happen that was not going to happen. Everyone acted and conducted themselves as professionals. But I did think it was interesting. I did have people reacting to Kamala's facial expressions and wondering, why she was acting that way. And I thought it was really interesting because it's like no one's going to change their mind, but people want to find fault in the other side. And I was like, I really don't think that's the question here. He's acting totally disrespectful to everyone involved. And they're like, well, they're all acting bad. Everyone always likes to say they're all acting bad. Like somehow that's okay. Like if on the schoolyard, if Chris hit me first and I get to hit him back, right? So it was another example of that throughout this process. But nonetheless, it was interesting, and I thought she held her own and represented the great state of California, and all things that we hold dear very well. And I'm glad to have someone who's such a badass running for vice president.
Absolutely.
That's where I'm going to land on that. We put up our Joe flag on the street this week because we were talking about our role here in North Carolina. While we aren't going to be able to change a whole bunch of minds, we've been here for 6 weeks and we've made lots of friends and engaged with people. And I feel like because we didn't roll up with our Biden-Harris flags and gear at the beginning, people got to know us as people and understand who we are and what we represent and the kind of things that they like. And there are just a couple, surprisingly few, undecided voters on the street. And we felt like now that they've gotten to know us and now we've spent the time, that it was an opportunity for us to be influential. So we hung our Joe flag with big thing in place of our American flag. And that made me feel excited. Harper, of course, rolled around in it first, which I don't think is flag protocol, but.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, the polls show that we're moving the needle.
Yeah. And if we can influence one person, that's what we were thinking, is if we can influence one person who's undecided to think critically about what their decisions are, then that's the role we should play. And it is a critical thinking part, and it is maybe think twice, and you don't have to vote the way we vote. You just have to vote.
Well, and your point about we've built great relationships, got to know neighbors, having
at a distance
conversations with them out in the street. Some of whom are Republican, some of whom are Democrat, but that is, for us, a healthier way to have a debate and have a dialogue than just blasting each other on social media. That's not actually going to probably change anybody's mind. So hopefully we've had maybe a little bit of influence, but
one way or the other.
One way or the other.
And in fact, that is interesting because we saw The Social Dilemma last week, and I think must read for everyone living in this digital age. And a reminder that what we see in our feed is very designed around us as individuals. And so our feeds are very different. And as a result, we tend to have validating feeds. So sometimes when you're screaming into the ether, your voice may or may not be heard by those who are disagreeing with your viewpoint.
Yeah.
So one of the other things we were just touching on mental health, and I think it's worthwhile to just talk. We talk about mental health here a lot, and certainly in the COVID world, for 40-year-olds, written by 40-year-olds. But we are, I think one of the things that we've thought about is your experience in Katrina, and sort of that experience to trauma and that experience that we go through, and now collectively as a nation instead of collectively as a city. But the importance of being able to sort of step out of the crisis and remind yourselves that we have to actually take time and protect ourselves and be healthy, which for us is oftentimes exercise. So let's take a loop around our 2.5 mile thing, socially distanced, healthfully, all those sort of things. That's a great activity that we get to do, but it could mean, working out to an online workout class at home, but being able to find opportunities to take yourself out of the crisis and into something that's changing your mindset is really important.
Yeah, my big thing is getting out from behind these screens, and we're obviously looking at a screen right now, and we're spending a lot of time. But one of the things I think that's happened is, from a work perspective, and I'm really interested to get into the student perspective, because I think students are actually they're in a workplace environment now.
Thank God, our future.
School and work has sort of merged. We're all just at home, but from a work perspective, we are oh, great, we all work from home now. But what has ended up happening is we're on endless Zoom calls. And I'm encouraging people, including some of our colleagues who might be watching right now, to push back against that, right? You don't have to be on a Zoom call one after the other all day long in the same type of environment you would be in the workplace. In fact, maybe a Zoom call replaces what would have been a business trip to go have a meeting with a customer or do something like that. But when you're just having a conference call, could that Zoom call be a phone call on your AirPods while you're taking a walk and you're outside in the fresh air?
Like our friend Duke.
Yeah, exactly. So
there's a guy who walks the loop, I think 7 times a day, which is then calculate that. So 7 times 2.5, it's, do the math, 17.5 miles. And I have no idea. I mean, that's just a lot of loops. But you're right. Giving that space for yourself and finding that outlet. And you're right about the business trip, which is, think about how much you went to Omaha recently, not during COVID, pre-COVID. So in the winter, which was also crazy. But that took 4 days, 3 days of travel, right? And
away from you, away from our 2-year-old.
Yeah. And yes, there's relationship building that needs to happen in person, and that's not going away. But the moment is that you don't then, let's say we get to cut that one trip off. You don't then have to fill in the 36 hours that you would have been traveling and doing other things and sitting on a Zoom call to be actually worth. And I think something that we've been talking about is, how do we shift the mindset from my worth is based on the number of hours I sit at my computer to, and we do this a lot at Launchpad, my worth is about the impact that I'm having. And many of our, in fact,
outcome
the vast majority of our team works part-time on Launchpad and then works on other things, or is at home, speaking to you, Ariel, is at home homeschooling her 2 kids right now because they aren't able to be in school. And so I think it's really important to recognize that the number of hours does not equal the contribution that one can make. And so my leading charge is to say, find out how you carve out those hours that make you a healthier person, that make your mind a healthier mind, that give you those breaks and those inspiration moments that maybe came from hanging out with people and drinking coffee, but maybe need to come from your own self in times of COVID, right? And, you know, I think I've worked for plenty of CEOs who have, well, there's a lot there. I have worked for plenty of CEOs who have done things like set a 5 o'clock Friday executive meeting to make sure that all their executive team members were there at 5 o'clock on Friday, which is like the worst thing you can do to a father, to a mother, to someone who just wants to get a break for the weekend, right? Like that is just, you're literally saying your hours in front of your computer are more valuable than you. And so I think 9 times out of 10, we are much more productive when we're spending time doing the work that we love to do and having an impact on the organizations we are than when we're forced and chained to our desks and sitting there. And I think Zoom makes it really easy for you to chain yourself to the desk. And I think right now we lack purpose in some ways. And Zoom allows you to be like, well, at least I'm on a conference call. And being on a conference call is not adding a lot of value often.
Way to build morale. All right. Why don't we get to it with our guests?
What do you think about that?
I think that's right.
I'm going to let you finish. I'm just teasing. Come on, that was funny.
I think that the most important thing from my perspective is that over the last month of being here in North Carolina, we went from basically at the end of our mental rope. We had been dealing with COVID. We had been dealing with the impact on our business, shutting down 2 of our locations, just an extremely shitty business situation. Then followed that up with the wildfires in California that we evacuated from and burned our entire neighborhood, and all of our neighbors lost their homes. We were just literally on our last rope from a mental standpoint. So this has been very restorative. I was expressing to my mom how grateful we are to her that we've been able to be here for the last month or so. And yes, I think we've restored our mental health by being outside, by surfing, by taking walks, and meanwhile working at the same time and being as productive as possible, but not being chained to being behind the screen. So yes, I think that from my standpoint is a healthy way and something I would advocate for people who all are going through some sort of a trauma and challenging times right now. Everybody, we all are across the world, right?
As we say,
Globally.
Take a break, Hazel.
Yeah.
No, I think that's right. And let's jump into the conversation. But I will say you're exactly right. If there was a before and after for mental health for Chris and Ann, this is the after. And the before would have been me not able to open my stroller, insecurity, in tears, leaving the car seat back, forgetting the food for the baby, and running through the airport as if I was bat out of hell to barely make our plane. Mm-hmm. That would be our before. And I am very grateful to be on this side of that process. And I know that has been us giving ourselves the break and the time to get through that and to just process and give ourselves a break. But we're not going to give these guys a break. So
we've kept them waiting.
Line it up. Let's keep them waiting. Now students from across the globe are struggling with the uncertainty, anxiety, and stress that stem from COVID-19. Putting a much needed spotlight on the importance of mental health among young people. Today, we have a passionate team of students aiming to address what they see as several pressing needs, creating a sense of community, highlighting student perspectives for school administrators and teachers. Oh my goodness, listen to people. And educating people about how significantly mental health can be impacted while isolating in quarantine. Here now to talk about how they are helping their peers to navigate these struggles with their mental health guidebook, Mind Matters, are Preeti Chemiti, Eric Lynn, and Emma Watts. Hi, guys.
Hello.
All
Welcome.
right.
Hi.
So this is one of our first times having multiple talking heads on the screen. I'd love who's going to lead from your side and give us a little bit of the story behind Mind Matters.
Yeah, I can go ahead and dive right in. First and foremost, thank you to both of you sincerely for giving us the opportunity to showcase our work. Just speaking on behalf of everyone at Mind Matters, we're really appreciative of that. But in terms of where our idea developed from, it really was a student-driven initiative, as you mentioned. So for additional context, I'm a current student at Princeton University. I'm a sophomore right now. And last spring, I applied for a fellowship grant to receive funding to work on an independent project. And with the timing of everything, that coincided with briefly right before COVID really struck at the heart of a lot of campuses across the country. So when we realized how pertinent it was to discuss the mental health implications of being displaced from your academic communities and going back home, and even including all the things that you talked about very eloquently in terms of all the changes that are going on in the world with politics and just the environment that we live in right now, we recognized that a really integral step to wellness was not only working on addressing public health policy issues with COVID-19, but also encompassing that to include mental health initiatives for students, teachers, and academic professionals. So the three of us all worked together to create a guidebook that with our funding, we're able to make free and accessible to everyone via our website. So we're really grateful for the opportunity that we had in making this project a reality. And just on behalf of my team, I'm really grateful that students were able to drive this initiative and bring to the table a new conversation about mental health in the face of COVID-19.
That's great. And what's the response been so far? I know you have had thousands and thousands of downloads, but what's the reaction been and sort of the interest here?
Yeah, it was really an overwhelming response. All three of us haven't been involved in a project this large scale at this point in our academic careers yet. So I remember when we first launched it, initially we had a problem with our email servers crashing just because we had so many people requesting copies of our guidebook that we didn't know how to respond or how to formulate a response effectively enough to get these copies distributed in a timely manner. So we were able to adjust and learn in the process as we went along with things. But really, it's just been growing ever since we launched it at the beginning of August. And I think that really speaks to a lot of the things that we've been discussing so far and how our circumstances have been changing and how mental health continues to be pertinent, not just for students, but outside of the academic scope of our realities, just being at home and being confined to a certain environment that might not be conducive to maintaining our wellness.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been a demand. We have over 3,000 downloads now, is that correct? Yeah. 3,000 downloads over
Almost 4,000 now.
almost 4,000. Yeah, so
That's amazing.
an overwhelming support from people who are using the guidebook, and we're still doing the outreach process, receiving feedback. But yeah, it's been great so far, and we're looking forward to taking this into the future.
That's amazing.
On my side, I've actually talked to my counselor, the director of counseling at my university, and he's been graciously using it and learning how to adapt to online counseling sessions now, and he's found that really valuable. Additionally, I've talked to teachers who have used it in their classes as well, and they have all it's been well received.
That's great. So I was sort of looking for resources around mental health during COVID, which is how I came across you guys and came across Mind Matters. I'm particularly interested in, what really struck me was that this research was being done by students. You guys are all students, and then it was being informed by a lot of the interviews that you're doing with students, and you interviewed students across the country in all 50 states. Tell us some of the things that you're learning and that you've learned from a student perspective, and then I'm going to follow up with things that you would advise educators, but in particular teachers. Parents. We have parents who are watching this, but give us the student experience. What are you guys going through, and what are students around the country going through right now?
Yeah, I can start by at least speaking from my personal experience, what I think really stood out in developing this project. And I think the biggest thing that I could not emphasize enough was that we really discovered how there is no singular response to this pandemic, especially in terms of our mental health. And we analyzed and examined all of the responses and interview questions that we got from the people that we spoke with. And really, regardless of where you're geographically situated or what your financial circumstances might be, there really is a variety of ways that each of us copes with the trauma and loss and healing that we're all experiencing right now. So that ties in really well with what I think I would emphasize to educators and teachers, because I think it is really beneficial having those perspectives laid out to understand that it's not a monotonous perspective on exactly what's happening to each and every student across the country. Rather, for teachers and even parents, being empathetic. And I think that ties in really well to a point that Anne brought in, which I loved, talking about productivity in the age of COVID-19. And as students, I think all of us have had this discussion several times, but we almost feel this need to associate our self-worth and our self-value with how productive we are and how much work we get done in a day. And although I recognize the fact that we wrote a guidebook over the summer, and we obviously spent a lot of time over the summer doing that, at the same time, that in no way is indicative of what type of work we wanted to present and let out into this community that we're working for, because we ultimately understand that these times are different than what they normally would be, to say the least. So regardless of what you're going through, and regardless of the fact that we're all impacted by COVID, our responses take on different forms, and it's so important to be understanding of that.
That is interesting. I think one of the things that I find is people react differently to the circumstances and the trauma, and then their initial reaction tends to be their initial reaction when crisis comes, right? And oftentimes a crisis lasts for not always as long as this is. And so we've had friends who are like, oh my gosh, I've got this idea and this idea and this idea, and we got to do all these things, because my initial reaction is like to just keep moving. And it's really hard to maintain that. And so I feel like that's something that we see commonly is that your knee-jerk reaction is not always the healthiest. And so I'm hoping people are processing, like, I think we're reacting and managing things differently than would be our normal, because it's not normal.
Right. And even when we were working on designing the book, none of us had the foresight to consider how long this pandemic would last. And in the middle of writing our guidebook, actually, is when we were receiving decisions from college campuses about whether or not we would be returning in the fall and what our futures look like. So it is really important to be considerate of how different the future might look for each and every single one of us. And I think that's a really excellent point.
How do you think students are being impacted, both high school and college students, but in non-academic areas of your life, right? High school and college are so much about relationships and friendships and finding your tribe and building your community, and all sorts of sort of personal development that is really important and is about being around other people and peers, and learning, just sort of exploring and learning. How are those areas of your life going? How are you developing in that? Is that all sort of Zoom calls and sort of online and social media, or is there a void there, or are there things that are sort of filling that in?
He wants to know if there's secret parties he can get invited to.
I can take this. I think the pandemic has definitely had a huge impact on like the social aspect of young people's lives. I remember like taking classes in the spring when they all went online so suddenly. It was so hard to connect with the teacher, connect with the other students, make those like friendships that you'd be building if you're actually in class, if you're meeting people in person, even like extracurriculars in person. you're just not able to have that same personal connection over Zoom. And that's really hard for me because then it's all work almost and no, you know, like socializing with people. So I actually decided after Princeton went online for this coming semester, I decided to take a gap year. And I think that was a good decision for me, just for my mental health. And I can not have to stress so much about online classes and focus on just trying to maintain my relationships over, Zoom and FaceTime. And I think that was the best for me, but it's different for everybody. And it definitely had a huge impact on my life. So.
I mean, I think that's interesting, right? Which is, and something that we've talked a lot about, and as we think about just what we're doing, there is a benefit if you can step outside of the crisis and think about what do I actually want to do and what's going to be good for me, then what you have the ability to be able to do is say, all right, well, I'm going to design the right answer for right now for me. And something we've talked about is we're like, well, you know what? We had a plan to raise a venture fund and do a bunch of different things. We're like, why are we actually adding to the plate right now? There's like, I got a 2-year-old daughter, which means I've got a lot of years of work ahead of us. Let's do what we're doing well, right? And let's continue to connect with our community. Let's run our business and let's make our business as successful as we can right now. But let's also like make sure that we can take advantage of this breathing moment and be there for our daughter between age 2 and age 4 before she has to go to school. God willing, she gets to go to school. But and to me, it's about sort of taking those opportunities, and it's very difficult for people to be able to find that sort of personal goal or personal objective and then go after that. And so it's great, Eric, that you sort of are like, this is what works for me. It may not work for you. And I think that whole idea of you should is now off the table, which is you should take care of yourself is the only should that should exist. Mm-hmm. And then everything else is figure out whatever that looks like, then just do that. So I think that's interesting. And I think everybody's got to take and carve their own path of wellness now.
I kind of want to bring my perspective too, because I am living on campus. I am a freshman at ISU, Idaho State University this year, and masks are required. And as a freshman, I'm in a new environment and I don't necessarily know everyone. And so it's been really hard to walk around and just see masks because a mask holds a lot of your emotion and a lot of the human aspect. And it's kind of been difficult, especially with having half of my classes fully online and then some being hybrid and some only my lab being in person, because obviously in a lab you have to be pretty hands-on. So it's been difficult to maintain my mental health, but luckily my university has been very adamant about providing free mental health counseling.
That's great. And how are you guys getting this message out? And what is sort of looks like what's next in terms of how you get more downloads, so the next time we see you, you're like, we had 100,000 downloads. What is your sort of perspective?
Well, clearly that's happening after this appearance.
Never say never. I'm downloading.
Yeah.
I know you already have. I need my own copy.
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak a little bit about this, and we can have Eric and Emma weigh in as well with their perspective. But what we did was we actually decided to reach out to as many public administrators as we could in high schools across the country. And fortunately, like I mentioned, the funding for this was originally through a fellowship with Princeton. So I was able to reach out to our director of counseling services on campus, and he sent out networking emails to college campus directors and counselors in campuses across the nation. So that was also helpful on that end as well. But now as we're looking more ahead into the future, we're continuing to roll this out because obviously there are many, many quantitatively public administrators that we'd want to reach out to in schools across the country. And we're also looking at getting our book published in an ebook format. So right now, as you both probably know, our book is available at mindmattersbook.org. It's completely free to download, as we mentioned, but we use a web interface to track and use those downloads. And then on the other end of things, we're hoping that perhaps just providing an ebook format in a different way that we normally have will be able to engage more users beyond what we've been doing so far.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I think a big part of how we're planning to get our message out, get the guidebook out to more people, is having these administrators that are reaching out to, like word of mouth or put out in their communities as well, their experiences with the book. And I think that's really going to help promote bringing it into other communities, other organizations, and like emphasizing the fact that it's from a student perspective. So like your students are going to be hearing from other students, empathizing with other people, and getting their voices heard.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but your primary focus was on high school, or is it both high school and college?
Yeah, it was both high school and college. So we were college students, and a lot of our contacts and interviews were college students, but we also wanted to be mindful of keeping balance between high school students and we contact as well.
Because I imagine certainly parents would value kind of getting in this sort of third party insight rather than, it's often hard to talk to your parents. At least in my experience, I'm Gen X, so it was different than Gen Y's. I mean, my parents are great, so I can talk to them, but never mind. These issues are sometimes better when you can kind of see them through the lens of others and have conversations around that. And I think it is interesting to shine a light on the college experience, because especially for those students who are not at home anymore, I imagine this is a great way, or a great Christmas gift for all parents to receive, so that they have a good way of sort of sparking dialogue with their kids when they're home. Is that a fair characterization? Is this a must read for all parents? That's what I'm trying to get to.
Right, and it's free too, so nothing better than a free Christmas present, right?
You guys are like Shopify.
So are there any tips for parents? We're sort of getting at the parent thing. We for example, we had a
how would you talk to your 2-year-old about this?
We have a friend who, they're it's very important to their kids, high school students, that the parents do not hog all the Wi-Fi while class is in session, because these guys, the guys, 2 boys, feel like it's really important that your Zoom's working, right? Just like this meeting or any other meeting. But so good Wi-Fi is very important to these guys. Any other things that that's obviously sort of anecdotal, but any other things that you were coming away with as you did these interviews that would be things that parents can be thinking about to have conversations around the mental health of their kids while they're going through this experience?
Right. I think our approach was somewhat twofold in that regard as well, because we wanted to make sure that it was both appealing to students, and then on the other side of things, teachers and parents as well. So the way that we organized our book is that the first half of the book contains those interview responses and the comprehensive research that we worked on for several months. And then the latter half has a facilitated conversational guide that teachers or parents can adapt into talking about mental health and what that means in their given context. So obviously mental health is something that's traditionally very stigmatized, and unfortunately it's a conversation that can be hard to initiate sometimes. But I think that with the implications that COVID-19 presents, and just as you mentioned, parents being proactive about listening to their children and being more empathetic, that sort of latter half of our book and providing support and resources in that regard allows students to explore individually on one end, and then also opens the door for teachers and parents to continue the conversation with them.
Awesome.
Great.
Cool.
I have a random question, which is, how did the 3 of you end up working on this together?
Yeah, that's a really great question too. I know that going into this, I actually had originally intended for this to be an independent project, just individually me working on it. which ties in well to our discussion of mental health, because I realized that was taking a toll on my mental health by trying to write an 80-page guidebook by myself. So Emma and I had met through a national conference a number of years ago. And Eric and I, as you mentioned, were both students at the same school, but we had never been in contact with each other prior to meeting this summer. So it really kind of was a shot in the dark when I was trying to build up a team. But I'm really, really grateful for the both of them, because even though our connections might have been somewhat distant from a few years ago or through just passing by each other in school and walking by on campus, we were really able to work really cohesively together, given the virtual challenges, obviously, that we faced with just working over Zoom predominantly.
Yeah, well, that's actually great, right? You had the constraints that we all are living under. So wouldn't have made sense if you were all hanging out in the same room.
Well, that's great. You know, I wanted to, you know, just sort of share how impressed I was when I, you know, came across the website, you know, Mind Matters book. You know, I expected it to be some, you know, academic researchers, you know, PhDs, you know, somebody who was really sort of thinking this through. And there's actually not that much research. I think that, you know, the initiative that you took in writing the book, and the book's available now, 80-page book that right when people need it, it's very impressive. So I just want to commend you on the work that you're doing, and the work that you're doing, you know, so early in your careers. You know, it was really nice to have you on today, and nice to come across such a helpful resource that you guys have put together.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because we really tried our best to make sure that people knew that it should be accessible to anyone. They shouldn't be deterred by the fact that some professional in the mental health community wrote this book, but rather from a hierarchical perspective, it's by students and for students. So we really appreciate you just being so generous and giving us the platform to share this and spread the word a little bit more, and giving us a chance to speak, since we're just 3 college students typically, but now we have a platform and a voice that I think we all feel is really important in our communities right now.
That's right. And in my career, underestimating anyone, regardless of age, old or young, is usually a path for failure. So we're grateful for you to be doing the work. And, you know, we can learn from everyone. And the only thing that makes you old is if you stop learning. So congratulations on just starting your journey. I can't wait to see what you guys do, and feel free to reach out to us to be helpful in any way. We've got a great platform of active and engaged entrepreneurs from across the country who I know are going to be really impressed and excited to dig in on this topic. And they're facing it themselves, whether at home or in their own work. So thank you guys so much. That was the team behind Mind Matters.
Yeah.
And we look forward, we're going to pass you guys back into the back room. And we look forward to seeing you guys. We're going to be in a different spot next week. We are on our way to the Netherlands of Canada, my home and native land.
Netherlands or to Canada?
You get, okay. So we're going to be going to Canada next week. We're going to be going to Quebec to see my family. We will be in quarantine for the mandatory 2-week period. And we will likely have Zoom and internet conference capabilities, we hope. But nonetheless, we're going to go up there. We're too close to make it, and that border never opened. So we're taking the band back on the road, heading up north, enjoying some crystal clear waters, bright blue skies, and some freezing cold temperatures. And
hopefully we have good Wi-Fi to come to you live again next Thursday. Before we do go, let's make sure we do our member magic, our shout outs for the week.
That is right.
Yeah. So in Stockton, Oracles of Truth is growing. We mentioned Oracles of Truth on the last show, that they were planning to launch a code academy to provide the Stockton community members with marketable skills. And now that plan is moving forward as they double their space at Launchpad Stockton.
We love to hear about expansion. And in Newark this month, we are excited to welcome new member Angela Onafawara of, help me out, EA.
Olafunke.
I like that. EA.
Which is
Olafunke.
awesome. Yeah.
Ile Olafunke is a custom high African style home decor store based out of Newark, New Jersey. And I'm about to go on your website and maybe be a customer.
I can't
'Cause
wait
I
to check out their
cannot wait
stuff.
to check out your stuff.
Super cool.
So welcome. And coming up next week, we've got Eric Sapp, President of Public Democracy, to talk about us big data and empathy-based machine learning, which is being used to tackle some of society's biggest challenges.
Yeah, including empathy is a helpful skill we learned about today. To speak to your kids or your students or your spouse with empathy. So again, thank you very much to Preeti, Eric, and Emma, who joined us from Mind Matters. mindmattersbook.org is where you can download it. We'll put the link below the show when you watch it on YouTube later.
It's been great to see you guys.
It's been great to be here.
As we said, taking the show on the road, so less nautical attire and more fuzzy sweaters.
See you from Canada next week.